Welcome to Rock City Cookies, where we talk about all things cookies. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video. Thanks for watching. Hello, sweet friends. Thank you so much for joining me today for the tutorial of this Sesame Street birthday set. I made these cookies for my own little Sesame Street obsessed 2-year-old named Kipling. So sit back and relax as we talk about all 4 of the designs in this set. Before we begin, I want to talk real quick about my icing. I will do a full tutorial on how I make my icing very soon, but before we start the set, I thought I would give you a couple of quick tips. Now, when I am making black icing, I never start from fresh white icing. So what that means is that I always save any leftover icing that I have and I put it in my freezer until I need that color again. This will save you a lot of time from having to start over every single time with your colors from white icing. This is especially true whenever you have really dark colors that you are trying to achieve. Using leftover icing as your base instead of white icing will help you to get to those colors much faster with a lot less food coloring. So as you can see here, I took the bag that I had in my freezer, I cut off the end, and I poured that leftover icing into a bowl. Then I took a spoonful of fresh white icing from the batch that I had just made, and I mixed that into my black icing. After the new and the old icing are incorporated well together, I add more food coloring at that point. Now, I felt like this batch was still pretty black without having to add more food coloring, but I do use Americolor Super Black if you're interested in the black food gel that I use. Then I simply pour my icing into a piping bag, and I use a cup kind of to hold the piping bag open as I get the icing into it. Then I simply twist the end, I put a clip on it, and then I cut off the excess so it's not bothering me as I'm icing my cookies. And as always, if you have any questions about any of the things that I'm using, everything will be in the description box below. And of course, I repeated this exact process with the blue icing that I will be using for Cookie Monster. And I got really lucky. I did not have to use any new food gel coloring for either the black or the blue. So that's one of the reasons why I really encourage you to use leftover icing when you can, because it does save you time. Well, and money too, because you're using less gel coloring every time you're making icing. Now I'm showing you my white icing for 2 reasons. First, I wanted to show you that I use a water spray bottle to thin down my icing. I prefer to fill it with really warm water. I don't know why, but I feel like it makes the process faster. And I have used a spray bottle for so long that I know really how many sprays it takes to get to the different consistencies, or if I just need it to be a little bit thinner, I know how many sprays that is. So it's just a trick that somebody taught me at the beginning of being a cookier that I thought I would share with you in case you hadn't heard of it. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about with icing is my bags. So because I do 2 consistencies for every single color, I do a thick or piping consistency and I do a flood or thin consistency for every single color I do. So because of that, it gets a little confusing when looking at my cookie table at which consistency is which in which bag when I'm going to grab the icing. So the trick I use to be able to tell what consistency each color of icing is right away is if it is a thick or piping consistency, I use a rubber band. If it is a thin or flood consistency, I use a clip. So right away I know rubber band means thick icing, a clip means thin icing. Okay, so that's the icing tips I have for you today. Now let's get to decorating some Sesame Street cookies. All right, let's start with the birthday number. So my son was turning 2, so of course I chose the number 2, but this could be applied to any birthday number, although I guess with Sesame Street it probably will be one of the smaller numbers. With a thick consistency icing, you will want to outline your number. Now, this number 2 is one of our cookie cutters. I'll be sure to link it down below, but any number set will work. After you are done outlining, it is time to flood our cookie. Now, you will notice here that I do like a puffy icing, and I think that I'm able to achieve that in a couple of ways. For starters, I don't have a really thin flood. I think the more water you add to the icing, the flatter it becomes, so make sure you don't over water your icing. And the other thing that may help, and this is just a complete guess, is that I do mix my icing in my mixer for quite a few minutes. I know a lot of cookiers who swear by mixing it for only 2 or 3 minutes, but I prefer to mix mine for about 6 or 7 minutes. I do also add corn syrup to my icing, and I really feel like that helped with my consistency after I started doing that. So maybe try those 3 things if you are having problems with flat icing. Now, while our cookie is drying, I'm going to thicken up some of our blue icing for the fur texture that will be on top of our number 2 cookie. Now, in order to achieve this effect, your icing has to be pretty thick, so make sure you add a lot of powdered sugar to your mix to thicken that royal icing up. Okay, now that our icing is nice and thick, you are going to want to use the Wilton Grass piping tip. Now, I recommend trying this on a spare cookie or on a paper plate or something along those lines before you do it onto your cookie to make sure your icing is thick enough. You will know your icing is thick enough if it completely holds its shape once you pipe it out of the tip. The best way I found to use this tip is to squeeze out a little bit of icing, let that icing touch the cookie, and then very quickly release pressure off the bag as you pull up away from the cookie. The good news is that Cookie Monster's fur goes everywhere, so this does not have to be perfect. Just kind of move your cookie back and forth with the icing tip so that the fur looks like it's moving in all different directions. And because you flooded your cookie in the same color that you are doing the fur, you don't have to worry about it being noticeable if there's any holes. And that's it. Our number 2 birthday cookie that looks like Cookie Monster's fur is done. I feel like what makes custom cookies custom is to make sure to always include the birthday number as well as the birthday kiddo's name. So I've already done his number, so let's do his name on a cookie. Now, this cookie cutter is also one of the cookie cutters that my husband designed, so I will make sure to include the link below to our Etsy shop, but just outline and flood whatever plaque cookie cutter you are going to use. Now, since I'm only doing 4 designs in this set, I knew 2 cookies would reference Cookie Monster and 2 cookies would reference Elmo. So since I will be doing a Cookie Monster and I did the Cookie Monster number, I knew I needed this plaque to reference Elmo. So I'm going to pop all my air bubbles and then I'm going to let this cookie dry for several hours underneath a fan, and then I will move on to adding my Elmo details as well as Kipling's name on top. Now for this cookie, I knew I wanted Elmo's face to kind of just be peeking up from the bottom. One of my all-time favorite cookiers, her name is Carlotta from Carlotta's Sweets. She does this a lot with her character cookies. She'll have just kind of a part of their face on a cookie, and I love the way that looks. So with her as my inspiration, I decided to just do half of Elmo's face on this cookie. So going to Google, just look up Elmo face clip art and you'll have a ton of options. And then just move your cookie to where only half of his face is projected onto your cookie, and then outline all the main areas of his face at that time. After you are done outlining, it's time to fill in the areas with a medium consistency icing. I always choose to start with the eyes because I'm going to have to go back and add the pupil in later, so I want to make sure the eyes have the longest amount of drying time. So I start with the eyes first on all of my character cookies. Now it's important to let each section dry a little bit before you move on to the next section. Otherwise, all of your icing will just blend together and you won't get that defined look that you really need to achieve a character. And it doesn't take a whole lot of time of drying in between each stage, but definitely a few minutes, and if you put them under a fan, it'll speed up the process. Now that I've done the white of both parts of his eyes and I've let those dry for a few minutes, it's time to do his nose. I can't stress enough, be very careful when you're doing these types of cookies. You want to go very slowly, be very careful with your icing, be careful with your scribe. Slowly move the icing where you want it to go. If you have the right consistency icing, it will stay in place until you move it, and that's ideal. I also recommend a thicker icing simply because you don't want it spilling over the side or spilling into the other areas that are supposed to be for other colors. So just go slow, don't rush it, and take your time when you're doing characters. Now that his nose has dried, let's add the red of Elmo's fur on both sides of the nose and eyes. Now, this area in particular, I didn't want to add too much icing to, because the nose and the eyes actually should pop out more than his fur. Because if you kind of look at Elmo, his nose and his eyes are separate from his fur. So to add that kind of 3D look that you're wanting to achieve with a character, you always need to think about what they look like in real life. So for that reason, I didn't put a whole lot of red icing in these areas, just a little bit, and then I dragged the icing to the eyes and to the nose, and it just kind of gives that look that the nose and the eyes are actually on top of the red icing when really they're on the same level. So let your scribe be your best friend and just carefully and slowly move the icing exactly where you want it to be, filling up all of the empty spaces. Alright, let's finish out Elmo's eyes with a black icing for his pupils. So very slowly fill in his eyes until you get it to about the depth that you think it needs to be. And then using your scribe, just kind of fill in any remaining space with your black icing, as well as pop any air bubbles to prevent cratering. Now, in all these years of doing cookies, I've never made the leap to purchase an airbrush. Thought about it a zillion times, I've just never done it. However, I love the look of airbrushed backgrounds, and I get jealous of them sometimes. So instead of just leaving this cookie a white, plain old cookie, I decided to use my edible marker and add a little polka dots in the background. And I really do think it made a huge difference in the outcome of the cuteness level of this cookie. All that to say, I know that as a cookier, we can get caught up in all the cool gadgets and all the things, but I just want you to know you don't have to have everything to be a great cookier. Just use what you have and use it well, and you are set. And one day you can get the things that are on your wish list, but don't let that hold you up from doing fun designs. Using the Fonto app that I love so much and my projector, I projected Kipling's name onto the cookie. I piped that out with a thick icing, and we are done. The birthday boy's name is now on a cookie. Okay, it's time to make our Cookie Monster cookie. Now, these cookie cutters, I actually got the Cookie Monster and the Elmo cutter in a set. I got it off of Amazon, and they were just metal cookie cutters. I'm pretty sure they were by the Wilton brand, and I'll include the link below. However, they didn't come with a digital image to project onto the cookie. It wasn't a big deal at all to go to Google, look up some clip art to project the Cookie Monster image onto the cookie. Now, both Cookie Monster and Elmo are pretty simple images, and so you are more than welcome to freehand those. It would not be difficult to do at all. However, I know with me personally, if I don't have a consistent image all the way throughout a set, if my Cookie Monsters look just a tiny bit different from cookie to cookie, it bothers the perfectionist side of me. So I do project images as often as I can, just so I have consistency on every single cookie in my sets. Okay, with my character cookies, the first thing I do is I outline all of the areas that I know I'm going to be flooding with icing. I do this for two reasons. One, it gives me a guide and I'm not having to pull out my projector every single time I need to do a new section. But also, I'm a visual person, so it helps me to see the whole character outlined, to know all the different icing colors I'm going to need, where it needs to be flooded first, all of the different steps. I can see it better if my character is outlined to begin with. And with Cookie Monster and Elmo, they kind of always have that black outline, which is why I outlined the character in black. Now, other characters, I don't necessarily outline them in black, I outline them in the color that each section will be. But since these are special characters that are outlined in black anyway, that is why I chose to outline each section in black. Now I'm talking too much, so I'm missing things, but one of the things you saw me do was to correct the eyes. I decided that the area that I was going to be flooding needed to be a little bit different. The pupils needed to have a little bit more space, so I fixed that by just taking the icing off with my scribe. And now I'm doing the mouth first because the mouth is in the middle of the cookie, so if I can get that to dry, then I can do the fur all around it. So it's a medium consistency icing, get out all of those air bubbles, and then you'll be ready to let that dry and you can move on to the next step. Okay, if you were paying attention, you heard me say I always do the character eyes first. However, I made an exception this time, and let me tell you why. I knew I could do the black mouth first and let that dry for just a minute while I worked on one of the eyes, and then I could move on to the blue fur portion of this cookie. So that is the only reason why I did the mouth first this time instead of the eyes, is because I knew I needed the mouth to dry longer so that I could do the fur and then still have time to come back and do the eyes. Okay, now when doing the character's fur, I'm actually going to work in sections, and this is because one, my icing is thicker, so I need to take the time to spread out the icing to where it needs to go before my icing starts to crust over, which happens quickly with thick icing. So that is one of the reasons why I am making sure to go ahead and just flood in sections and let my scribe do the work from there. But also, I don't know why, but it just looks better when you do it this way. And let me tell you about where I learned how to do this. Now, I learned how to do a lot of my character work by taking a class from a cookier named Sherlyn, and her website is Cookies Art by Sherlyn, and I'll be sure to include it in the description box below because I've taken a few cookie classes and her character classes are out of this world. They are so detailed and it really upped my game on how to do characters. I'll show you up here in the corner the before and after of my Mickey Mouse cookies. This is what it looked like before I took her class, and this is what they started looking like after I took her class. Like a phenomenal teacher, so I highly recommend her. I'll include her link below. However, she taught this is one of the ways that she does her cookies, is she does section by section when she's doing the characters, and she just works that icing really slowly with her scribe. And I don't know why, you guys, but it does make such a difference. So I highly recommend doing it this way. Now, in full transparency, she did just start this really cool affiliate program, so I might receive a kickback if you use my link below to sign up for her class, but I am being 100% truthful with you guys. I took her class over a year and a half ago. I loved it so much. I learned so much, and I still have access to that class today, which is phenomenal if I ever want to go back and rewatch something. So I'm being truthful with you guys. Yes, it may be an affiliate link. It's my first ever affiliate link, but it is a really, really phenomenal class, and I highly recommend anything that she does. Okay, now that my pitch for why you should go take her class is done, let's finish our Cookie Monster cookie. Let's do the white part of his second eye. You're going to want to just go around carefully, and then with your scribe get out any air bubbles that you may see on the surface. Just be really careful, don't add air into your icing, so you want to make sure when you're getting out air bubbles you're being really gentle so you're not accidentally incorporating more air instead of getting all the air out. Okay, now that the white parts have had some time to dry, let's add in the black pupils into Cookie Monster's eyes. Slowly fill the holes with the black icing. Use your scribe, move around the icing as you need to, get out any air bubbles, and then our Cookie Monster cookie is done. Okay, for our final design today, let's make Elmo. And again, since I didn't have a digital image to match this cookie cutter, I just went online, found Elmo's face. This is actually the same exact image I used for our name plaque, and I projected that onto this cookie. I'm going to follow the same steps that I did before. I'm going to outline all the sections of this cookie that I'm going to flood with the black icing, and then I'll go back and work slowly in each section, letting them all dry before moving on to the next step. While I'm finishing up outlining, I just wanted to share a little tidbit with you guys. In my recording studio, which is actually our guest bedroom, I cannot explain how I do these cookies without moving my hands. So the whole time I'm talking to you guys, both of my hands are waving wildly around me. I have no idea why. I cannot stop, but my poor microphone has suffered more than one blow because of it. Lord help me. Alright, so this time I decided to contradict myself again, and I'm going to do Elmo's eyes first. Okay, so after you flood your eye and get out any air bubbles, let's move on to the mouth next. Now I know I have said that I'm flooding all of these areas with a medium consistency icing, and I know icing consistencies can be one of the hardest things to figure out as a cookier, especially when you say medium consistency icing, because medium can mean something totally different from one cookier to the next. However, my definition of medium consistency icing is an icing that when you pipe it, it stays where it is, it holds its shape, yet when you put it next to more icing, it blends together, and it's not too thick that with my scribe, I can't smooth it out. So that is a huge range of medium consistency. Even in this cookie, you can see the difference between my red icing, my black icing, and my white icing, and yet all of those consistencies I would say are medium. So my best advice for finding the right consistency for these type of character cookies is 1, when you pipe your icing, does it stay put? If you pipe it in a line, does it stay in a line or does it spread out? If it spreads out, it's too thin. Number 2, pipe 2 lines of your icing right next to each other. If they do not blend together, your icing is too thick. And finally, pipe a little blob, a circle or some shape. And if your icing is not able to be smoothed out by your scribe so that it looks nice and shiny and flat and you can't see where your scribe was, then your icing is the right consistency. If you can see where your scribe is, if your scribe is not able to smooth out your icing well, your icing is too thick. And the only way to fix consistency is by taking out the icing from your bag, put it back in a bowl, and if it's too thick, add a little bit more water. If it's too thin, add a spoonful of powdered sugar at a time until you get to the right consistency. I know it's extra work to take all of the icing back out of your bag, put it back in a bowl, fix it, and then re-bag it. But in the end, you'll be so glad you did. I have suffered through the wrong consistency for sets many times, and very rarely have I not lived to regret it. So just take that extra time to make sure you get the right consistency for these characters to have the end result that you need. And also make sure you're not overfilling your icing in this character. You work section by section, add a little bit at a time, move the icing where it needs to go. If you do all of his face at one time, you might have too much icing in your character and it might overflow, it might go into the areas that you've already done. So work section by section, use your scribe, smooth out each section before you move on, and before you know it, your Elmo cookie will be almost done. Okay, our final step is to add Elmo's nose. Now I hope you can tell here, but the base of our cookie has had quite a while to dry, pretty well dried all the way through. So I'm going to add the nose on top. I'm going to do a black outline so I know exactly where my orange icing should go. And then with a medium consistency icing, I'm going to fill in his nose. Now I didn't add a squiggly line underneath this icing, and I should have, because when it dried, it did indent a little bit. So you are going to want to make sure you add some squiggly lines underneath the orange icing before you put his nose, just to help prevent cratering. I know it's not a guarantee, but I have found that it really does help. prevent it. So add that squiggly line and then put down the orange icing for his nose. Okay, our Elmo cookie is done, and with the completion of our sweet little Elmo, that means our Sesame Street birthday set is complete. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the next one.